So we're giving it a shot right now.
This is live on Facebook.
It's trying. It's trying. So if we're just sitting here looking stupid while this is trying, then that's what we're
Or
going
they
to do.
can see everything that we're doing.
I think we are now officially live, Sam
We
Musa.
are?
And
Are we?
so we had to, well, I have to
How
give
can you
credit.
tell, buddy?
We're live on Facebook now.
All right.
And so I have to give credit where credit is due because the boss just did all that. And so we're only about 9 minutes late tonight. Is that what that is? 9 minutes after the hour. So we are definitely live. If you're out there and you waited for us, all we can do is say thank you. For some of you, it might be a blessing that you couldn't have got on earlier because you might not have been able to get on at the right time. So what I'm going to ask you to do again is to make a comment in the comment box. I will say hello to people. Obviously, Sam will rant for the next 45 minutes to an hour and a half, something like that. And so this is the wealth debate lucky number 13, Sam Musa, lucky number 13. So with that being said, we got some questions that we got between last week and this week. And a couple of them, one is they want to talk about the history of credit. That was one that I remember. Was there another one that we had? And was there something else you were going to talk about, Sam? I know there's probably tons of things you were going to talk about. So Sam Musa, you're on.
Let's let the mob decide what we're going to talk about.
They want to talk about the history of credit.
We'll talk a little bit about that too. We can continue to talk about that. Big news was the House. Basically, they passed the bill in the U.S. To inject some more money into the economy. Let's see here. This was House Democrats passed a $1.9 trillion coronavirus relief bill on Wednesday, sending it to the president, Joe Biden, who is expected to sign it Friday. Biden said checks of up to $1,400 should start going out this month. So this is $1,400 going out this month, checks to the American people. There's some stipulations and restrictions based on income and stuff like that. But this is a lot of money, 1.9 trillion. Now that's all not going straight into the hands of the consumer, but a great deal of it is going in there to continue to.
I think 9% is what was going into the consumers.
So let's call it 10, right? So that's 1.9 billion. So that's quite a bit of money going in there. Obviously, the market enjoyed that, right? More money coming, the money supply increasing, right? They can continue to sell products, goods, and services, even though the individuals that are spending the money haven't actually created any new wealth. They haven't participated in the creation of wealth, meaning employment, jobs, right? Going to work and creating, products like cars and computers and services, even any type of service. That's all considered wealth too. Service wealth disintegrates basically the moment that you provide the service, whereas products you can invest. There's time and energy invested in the creation of that, and it deteriorates over time, right? So consider wealth, or one of the elements of wealth is human energy trapped, right? It's trapped in time. So human energy is trapped out. So when you build a car, you have all this energy and these people, the time and energy to put this car together. And that car has a set value, and it's a combination of a lot of different things, but a lot of it has to do with the energy that was created or used to create the car. So now that energy is trapped. And over time, like anything, right? Over time, that energy disintegrates, right? And the intrinsic value, of course, I think we've talked about this a few times, is zero. So eventually everything goes to zero, unless you want to buy the first tweet. Apparently somebody sold the first tweet. Yeah, digital archives, digital objects of value. The first tweet ever was sold, I believe, by the gentleman who created Twitter, who created it, and somebody bought it. I don't know how you measure that or the tangibility of it, but I think this will be a new and upcoming sort of new market for antiquities. in the technology market. So I don't know exactly how we measure them, but at the end of the day, it might sound crazy to you. Why would anybody pay for a tweet or the record of a tweet, which is really what it is? But it's no different than anything else, really. All wealth is created. The concept of wealth is a human idea, and it's been around for a long time. And one of those things that we wanted to talk about was the history of credit and how long it's been around. So I want to talk about a couple of references that I think would be wonderful books for you to read. And actually, there's a video series on it. One's called The Ascent of Money. The Ascent of Money. I think there's a 6-part BBC series on YouTube, actually, you can watch. I prefer the book. The book was wonderful. The series was great, but the book really goes deeper into it. It's called The Ascent of Money. The Ascent of Money. Wonderful, wonderful history of money. They talk about credit there, and the history of credit is covered in there, but also kind of trailing to how wealth or the consumption, how the creation of wealth and how we got to paper money and versus say bartering. Some interesting concepts. It's pretty comprehensive. I've read some other excellent material on the history, not specifically about money, but just about history that talks about wealth and money. I don't think you can. It's very difficult to separate the two when you're talking about history. So wonderful book if you like to pick up something that as a reference. The other book I have to mention. It's called what is it called? It's the Little Book of History, I believe it's called. Little Book of History. Excellent book, written with some highlights over time of history, and I actually picked up personally some ideas about money and wealth through there. They talk about the barter system, why the barter system can't go beyond a certain complexity. You start to realize, or at least I did, start to realize why we use paper money, why paper money is so important, why even though it's fiat currency, it's called fiat currency, Latin for let it be so. So money itself, we talked about this, has no intrinsic value. It has nothing backing it. There's not gold or silver or anything backing the Canadian, US, the pound, the franc. Nothing's backing any of the money really around the world, and why we still use it, and why it's better than gold, and why gold is not a functioning type of currency that we can use, right? And it's just too difficult, too challenging. Although gold has some specific cool attributes, money itself, currency, paper money, is really the most advanced form of money, an exchange of money, and it really is an exchange of trust because nothing's backing the dollar. How important it is, why it works so well. So those are some great, excellent books that you can reference. Also, before I get into that, one more story. I mean, is that inflation, that was a concern. It doesn't look like we're seeing a huge spike in inflation. The concern of that, even though there's a sense that we talked about this actually last week, because they're infusing that cash into the government, because the government of the U.S., and we're just talking about the U.S., largest economy around the world right now today, as an example, but they're infusing all this cash, like we said, $1.9 trillion going in there, not all to the consumer, but a great deal of it, and that money is going to get washed in, and it's never really 1.9 trillion. It's much more than that because of leverage and how that can be leveraged over and over again. But it's going to increase the supply of money, even though that being said, inflation really hasn't gone crazy or outrageous, because this is more of a replacement of GDP, of what kind of wealth or money supply we'd have if the GDP was healthy and normal and we were producing goods and services, and naturally wealth was being created, and would embrace the idea of some sort of inflation. We want that inflation because it tells us that there's expansion in the economy. So I still think there's a concern for deflation and changing the consumer's habits. The most resistant of economies definitely is the U.S. economy to deflation, and that's the reduction of consumption and prices coming down because of it. Temporary blips of deflation are okay, but long-term effects can be systemic and long-term damage to an economy like the Japanese economy. So I'm sure if you have any questions about any of the stuff I just shared, please put them out there. We'll continue to answer them and talk about them, and all of us learn together more about money. I think it's so important, and I think the more you learn about money and wealth, the more objective you become about the whole concept of wealth, and you become separated from it. And you depersonalize, which I think is a wonderful thing to do with money, because it's not the most important thing in the world, not even close. Even though it invades a lot of our daily thoughts and energies, we need to separate ourselves from it so we can really use it as a tool to achieve a better quality and quantity of time. You will have likely, well, studies have shown the more wealth you have, the longer you're likely to live. You eat better, you're healthier, you see the doctor more often, you have access to things that people don't want, and diet's a big part of it. Eating healthier and better is, if you don't have a lot of wealth or access to money, you tend to lean to more low cost, which are not necessarily healthiest things to eat. So it can extend lifetime having access to wealth, but also the quality of your experiences. And really, again, I don't know how many times we've said this, we'll say it again. Pip and myself and our team of people, the people we surround ourselves with, we pursue wealth because what it can do, not for wealth itself, right? It's for us to be able to control time. That's the most exciting part of wealth for us. It's not real estate, it's not the stock market. A lot of fun doing that stuff, but it's really having the ability to do what you want, when you want, with who you want, with little or no, financial consequences. At least a lot more flexibility in what you can achieve. So Pip has a great sequence of events when he talks about the hot dog, right? Buying a hot dog, and how the hot dog is still the hot dog. You want to share that? I love that sequence when you talk about, eating lunch, how much you can spend on lunch.
So yeah,
I love that, because it's an excellent depiction of the reality of quality of an experience versus the cost.
So, I mean, if you have $5 to eat for lunch, how many places can you eat lunch? Wherever you can, $5, maybe you get that hot dog at 7-Eleven is what I always make the joke. And it's the same hot dog that's, been in there for the last 3 days. But if you have $5, how many places can you eat lunch? If you have $50, how many places can you eat lunch? A lot more. If you have $500, how many places can you eat lunch? Probably anywhere you want. If you have $5,000, you get yourself a helicopter, hover over a city and eat your lunch. But at the end of the day, it's a burger and fries, it's a hot dog, it's a sandwich, it's a salad, it's soup, it's noodles, it's whatever you eat for lunch. But the dollar amount, it changes based on the type of, what you want to eat. It's still lunch. It's an hour out of your life probably. And that's what Sam talks about time. And so, it's really how you want to spend that money that you do accumulate, or wealth that you accumulate. And I mean, the wealth thing, and Sam talks about this a lot. Wealth is a real hard thing to trap. It's an impossible thing to really trap. And it's a hard thing to measure, because Elon Musk, over the course of a day, lost $27 billion. I mean, really, I guess we could argue that. Did it really change his lifestyle? Did it change where he's going to eat lunch? Probably not. Those guys that are in those billionaire stratospheres, life is a little bit different. And you may be surprised how, and I'm obviously from Nebraska, and I can still go drive by Warren Buffett's house, just like I could drive by anybody's house. There's no armed guards. It's not a big deal. It's a house that was bought, and I'm going to say, you can look it up. I think it was 1962 is when it was purchased. And it was, I believe, a $30,000 house then. Now I don't know what it's even worth today, probably close to $1 million, maybe $1.5 million. I don't even think it's that much. So, and does he really need, to have a bigger house? Probably not. I see some people putting things in the chat, which is awesome. People are talking about other books and other series. Somebody said Mike Maloney's Hidden Secrets of Money is a great series. Somebody wants to know when wealth or accumulating wealth started. When did people, start to accumulate or want to create wealth? The one thing I do want to say about Warren Buffett, and this is another thing that I would definitely tell everybody to watch. Every time I ever taught a class, I always said, watch, it's an hour documentary on Warren Buffett called Becoming Warren Buffett. And Warren Buffett, he can eat anywhere that he wants. He chooses to go to McDonald's every morning. That's what he chooses to do. Now, is he in the best shape? No, he doesn't look like he's going to go run a marathon, but he's also late 80s. He has a Coke dispenser in his office, and he's the biggest shareholder of Coke in the world. And the interesting thing about Coca-Cola, I believe, and it says it in the documentary, Becoming Warren Buffett, it says he makes like a half a penny every time somebody buys a Coke. You know, you don't really think about that too much until you think about how many Cokes are sold out there. And that's an insane amount of money over time, being that, you know, the fact that he has a large share of stakeholders ship in Coca-Cola. So anyway, Sam, some people are asking, when did creating wealth start? When was that process?
Yeah, so longer than we have documentation for, but short in the history of people, right? Of people being on this earth. So most of the world, most of the time on the planet, and through our evolution stuff, we didn't get to enjoy wealth because wealth only exists when there's an excess of, right? You can't measure wealth if you're hand to mouth, right? If you're just trying to survive, there is no wealth. Wealth is an abundance of, right? This is how you can measure it, right? So if we have extra stuff, that's how we measure wealth, right? Extra money, extra food, extra, property, extra things. That's what really wealth comes. If we look at the history, if we go back, we're talking like 5,000 years ago, even a little bit longer, maybe 5,500 years ago. Mesopotamia was one of the first places that they dug up some records, and Babylon dug up some records about credit, or the idea of credit. And I think if you credit's pretty advanced when it comes to wealth. So Mesopotamia and Babylon, relatively close in the Middle Eastern area, Iraq, where modern day Iraq is. There were some civilizations that were participating in wealth. There was a law created by, let me get this guy's name so I say this right. Hammurabi. There it is.
Oh.
The law of Hammurabi. So this is like we're talking 4,500 years ago. It dates back somewhere around there, 45 or 5,000 years ago. So this law, there was a series of laws about a lot of different things, but one in particular was the law of credit. So they found tablets dictating, you ready? So they were dictating limits of the interest you could charge on certain things. So for weed, it was 33.3% a year. So if you borrowed and you're borrowing wheat, the payment or the interest rate was 33.3%, and on silver it was 20% a year. And which is interesting. Silver. Think about this. Silver, the interest that I could charge if I lend you silver, I can charge you 20%. But if I lend you wheat, I can charge you 33%. Why do you think that is? And the real reason, the big reason is the silver is less risk, right? Because silver can't be consumed or go bad, where the wheat can. So it's a much higher risk for someone to lend you bushels of wheat than it is silver. And because of that higher risk, the interest was capped at a higher rate than say silver. Now we're talking 4,500, 5,000 years ago, they were doing this, and this is credit. In fact, and they found in in Mesopotamia, they believe the origin was there, same region, same area, same time period, that they found a tablet that it was like a bond, and there was inscribed that this bond, this tablet was a loan, and somebody was charging. I can't remember if it was for wheat or silver, but they were charging, say, 30%. What was cool about it is not what they were lending on this tablet. It was that it wrote, whoever holds the tablet holds the right to collect on that loan. So that's what a bond is, right? Bonds. If I buy a bond and I can sell that bond to someone else, it's whoever holds the bond. And they used to be paper; they're not anymore. With coupons, there used to be coupons, but bonds are things that I can bear bonds, right? Basically, the person who holds it can collect on it. That's what a bond is. They were using that concept 5,000 years ago. So a long time, and you got to remember that was the only recorded that we have so far as of yet. you got to believe that that was happening before they were documented, or how much was destroyed. So who knows, how long the bond market or the idea of credit was before that, but most certainly predated what we found in the history, in the archives of archaeology, and these clay tablets, um, and the law of Hammurabi. Did I say that right? It's pretty cool, actually, that there was more than that law. But those were credit laws. Now, of course, if you keep moving through history, you know that at one time, I'm sure some of you have heard the word usury. Usury. So usury is kind of a negative, I don't know, negative phrasing of lending money, and more specifically earning interest. So major religions, and there's many, not to exclude anybody, but Christian, Muslim, and Judeo tradition all believe that usury is banned. It's illegal. You shouldn't, and illegal, I guess, is illegal in the law of whatever it is that you believe in as a higher power. You shouldn't be lending money. And this is the way it was for a long time. You weren't allowed to lend money, and collecting interest could get you excommunicated out of the church, which is basically kicked out of church. And if you're kicked out of church, you're never going to go to heaven, right? Or at least the heaven that's dictated in that particular book, right? The Torah, the Injil, the New Testament, or the Quran, right? All of them talk about it. The one interesting thing is the the Torah, the Old Testament, does allow lending, but not lending to people outside the faith. You're allowed to, which for Europe was a big deal, because there was an opportunity for someone who was Jewish to lend to someone who was Christian. So a Christian could get a loan from someone, not another Christian, but they could get a loan from someone who's of the Jewish faith, because it was allowed. That transaction was allowed, even though the church said this is something we don't want to do. So they actually did create those transactions. One of the stories in the book of the Ascent of Money, he talks about the origin of the word bank, or banco, which means bench. This is where they conducted these transactions in the area of the city at the time. Venice, I believe it was, is the ghettos. They would do money transactions, and they would sit on these benches. And it's believed that the origin of the word bank comes from bench, or banco, Italian for bench, because this is where these things happen. So let's continue with the history. Just made a couple here points.
Real quickly, Sam,
Yeah.
your sister just popped on and said hello, so you better be good.
She's awesome. My sister listens every week, whether she could be on or not. She always calls me and says it was great. So I really.
Well, it's good that you have at least one fan.
I know I have one fan, someone who
You have a fan club of one. We know that.
Right.
A fan club of one.
That's right, fan club of one. So 800 AD, and these dates are generalized, but 800 AD. So 800 is after death, meaning that we're in the modern system of time. So 800 AD would be 1200, around the 1200, which is what, 800 years ago, around 800 years ago. So that the church bans usury. We're not allowed, to do that. We shouldn't be lending money. And then we got 1500. This is here. Let's see. So in England, I got here. England. Here we go. After the first country establishes legal rate of interest in England in 1545, during the reign of Henry VIII, I believe, and the rate was set at 10%. So there was, in the last, say, 500 years to even 1,000 years, to start the transition to the ability to start doing that. The modern banking, or what we know today, started about 600 years ago in Europe. Europe was very, very advanced in banking, far more than we were at the time, and we being everybody else in the world at the time. But that, I don't want to discount what happened pre-European banking systems. There was some modern systems like the bond market, like being able to lend money, 3,000 years before that, right? 3,000 years before that, or 35, even longer in the Middle Eastern region. So there was a lot of history and a lot of things happening, but empires rise and fall. So when they started creating the opportunity, and we talked about a little bit, we were talking about credit, extending credit. Credit was a big deal. The idea of credit was a big deal. And the origin, or one of the origins, or the beliefs of credit, the word credit, French credit, coming from, this is the Romantics, the language of the Romantics, coming from Roman and even Latin, credito, meaning to trust, or even in more of the sense of we're lending something or giving someone something in trust. That's how far back we're talking the idea of credit was. And again, it's much older than that. This is the stuff that we actually have discovered. The big reason credit's a big deal, this is one of the huge reasons, is that you got to understand, when you have something, like if you have an object, you paid for this object, the wealth is in there, but it's deteriorating over time. We know that it's deteriorating over time. If you can't release the wealth from here, it's trapped, right? It's trapped, and it's trapped and deteriorating. So credit allowed people to take things of value and borrow against them, or extract the wealth from them, like a line of credit on your property, or an equity line of credit on your property. What you're doing is you're trying to release the money out of this thing that you own, right? Whatever it is that you own. That's one piece of it. The bigger piece is, by releasing it, you've increased the money supply. That's a big deal. So you've increased the amount of money circulating when you can release it. If you can't release it, if you're living in a cash society, and once you get something, it's trapped in there, it's extremely difficult for an economy to expand, especially when things are bad, right? If you had to pay everything in cash, because you'd have to save, or more specifically hoard capital, until you could actually buy something. So this really slows down the growth of an economy, right? Because it can only be measured by the things that we can produce and hoard to transfer that wealth. There's more transferring of wealth than there is actually creation of wealth. So it was a big deal to be able to have something, borrow against it, and increase the supply of money in the system. What was cool about this is, when you borrow money, say you own a house and you borrow money, by you borrowing money and increasing the supply of money, you actually have a real good chance of increasing the value of the asset that you borrowed against, because you increase the money supply. And if we can increase the money supply, right, we have more people, available capital to more people that are bidding on the same goods and services, say that house. So because we pull that money out, we put it into the system, it's likely that the value of my thing that I borrowed against goes up. Now, is it really increased value? Well, no, it's really inflation, right? It's inflation because it's not that the thing itself now produces more wealth. It's not a bigger property. It's not it doesn't have more resources to offer. All it is that there's more people in the system that are allowed to participate in the purchase of this product. We actually talk about this, and this is a big reason why property is going up. There's really no rational reason. Like, they talk about supply and demand and blah, blah, blah. There's just not enough houses, for people who want to buy houses, right? All of a sudden, everybody wants to buy a house, right? It's really to do with the ability to, it's the same people, like people that were going to buy houses. And then there's the people that weren't going to buy houses. They were thinking about buying houses, but they were coaxed, or coaxed is maybe not the best word. They started to believe it was a good time to buy a house because interest rates were so low, right? So they're thinking, well, hey, because this is how people get so fixated on interest. This is such a terrible thing. It's really terrible that we believe that the way to measure a good mortgage is the interest rate. Like the interest rate, how much am I paying interest? More specifically, it's not the interest rate, it's the amortization table. So when you look at an amortization table, and this is boring, right? You look at an amortization table, and that's pretty scary when you look at an amortization table, and you see that I'm going to pay 2-3 times the value of this house, but this is the wrong number to look at. The real number to look at is what is the interest rate that I'm paying? Because that's the money I got to pay back, and the value of that money I got to pay back is going to deteriorate, right? This is due to inflation. So when we're looking at that, we think, if I can buy a house, think about this: if I can buy a house and I can pay it off quicker, right, and I can pay lower interest, then I'm ahead of the game. And this isn't true at all. This isn't true at all. We talked about this. It's better to pay at a higher interest rate than lower interest rate, or purchase at a higher interest rate than lower interest rate when you're buying a house, because you pay less for the house because you have to afford more money left over, or the amount of money you make per month to pay for the interest. And we know that when mortgages are high, the interest rates are high, they're more likely to go down, versus if they're close to zero where they are now, it's much more difficult for them to continue to go down closer to zero, because that's the easiest way for the values to go up. So these houses are not really worth anymore. Like we talked about these houses, right? The borrowing of money against it, increasing the value. It's not the house itself that's worth more. It's just that there's more money circulating around. Now, about 1900, I believe it was about 1900 is when it was actually just before the 1900s, the turn of the century, that of the 20th century, which is 120 years ago, they started actually tracking. That's pretty modern. They started actually tracking credit worthiness of people, and that's the origins. And this is some of the companies that are around today, like Equifax. That's how old Equifax is. We're talking like 100 years old when they started tracking creditworthiness of people and how they measure it. And that used to be a secret. They how they measure it, how they put together, used to be a secret, and how they did it. So people didn't know. The internet changed all that, right? So we know a lot more and understand a lot more how credit's measured, and we can play the game now of increasing our credit scores based on this. Ultimately, creditworthiness is important for lenders. For sure, it is important for lenders. But regardless of how well your credit is in a crashed economy, it doesn't matter. What your credit rating was before the economy crashed. If you don't have a job and you can't make payments on whatever it is, who cares what your credit score was? Who cares? But the dilemma was that they were giving a lot of money to people that weren't creditworthy, or whatever that number is, whatever even that means. And they allowed people to consume much more than they could afford to maintain, not pay back, maintain. Let me stress that point. We were having a conversation about borrowing, and I've had this conversation several times. People say, well, if you, obviously, we believe in debt. If you borrow all this money, don't you ever, at some point you got to pay it back. And we're like, no, actually we don't. we don't have to pay it back. What do we have to do? We have to do something. So when you borrow money, you don't have to pay it back. What do you got to do? You just got to maintain it, right? There's a debt service that you have to pay, but you don't have to pay the money back. The lender doesn't want you, for a lot of loans, they don't want you to pay back. So if you're paying somebody 10% return, they don't want you to pay back. They want you to keep paying the 10%, because if you pay the 10%, they get all their money, or zero risk if it's a straight interest rate loan. In 10 years, they've gotten all their money back. So there's zero risk for them in the way of principal capital, right? There's opportunity risk that's lost, obviously, if you're holding money. Someone's holding your money for 10 years, but you don't have to pay that back. I mean, gosh, if people are buying bonds that have a negative yield in Europe. Like, I mean, they're giving you money. You're lending the government's money. They're paying you back with less money, and people are still buying them. In the United States, savers, so-called savers, I mean, the bond market's huge for them, and they're lending money to the government for like 1.25%, 1.5%. I think the 10-year, what's the 10-year at PIP? 1.6. I don't know what it is. 1.5. That's percent per year. That's all you're getting. Go ahead, Pep.
Well, I just say we got a question related to that. I'll let you answer it. It said, why did increased bond rates move the stock market so much last week?
So this is it. So this is money movement, right? So when we think that inflation is going to rise, think about this. Okay, so first know this. There's this money supply, and let's just talk about the market. Push real estate out of it. Okay, so money moves between the bond market, extremely low risk, right? Extremely low risk, because when you're talking about government bonds, even municipal bonds, less municipal bonds than government bonds, but municipalities can sell bonds too, right? The security on that is the ability to raise taxes and collect taxes. So it's pretty secure in the way of money. Whereas the stock market is much more volatile, because it's based on private, that being corporations listed on the New York Stock Exchange, and their ability to sell their product and service, right? So they're more of a slave to the economy, right? And how much people can actually spend on, and the competition that they have. So money often moves between the bond market, right? Between the bond market and the stock market. So when people feel like, risk on, they're going to go to the stock market. And when they feel risk off, in other words, they want to take lower risk, they go to the bond market. Now, the bond market, if inflation is going to rise, the bond market's gonna go up, right? It's gonna go up, right? Because the cost of borrowing, this is what it is, right? To attract that money. Because think about it, if you have $1,000 and inflation is 3%, you're gonna try to, when you lend that money out, get at least 3%, right, or close to 3%, depending on the security that you get. If the inflation rate is 1%, you only have to cover 1%. So as inflation rises, the bond yields, right, and this is the cost of borrowing money, starts to go up. So when the inflation or the concern of inflation is in the market, what's going to happen to the bond market? It's going to go up. So as the bond market goes up, the yields become more attractive, right? And in some cases, more attractive than the stock market. So the money that was in the stock market shifts over to the bond market. The money's still in the system, right? But it's shifting from here to here. It's not necessarily, a lot of the money doesn't just come out of the stock market and just sit, right? Well, why would I do that? If I can just move the money from the stock market, higher risk, to lower risk, which is a bond market, because it's backed by taxes, the money will often shift to here. We saw a lot of the market, the stock market, the fuel for the stock market was money in the bond market because the yields were so low. It just kept on going lower and lower and lower and lower because of the lack of inflation and expansion. The money just shifted from there to there, which fueled it up. So when you hear about inflation concerns, when you hear about the ability to raise capital, there's a concern about things like that. You'll see the money go from the stock market to real estate, because if there's an increased inflation, that's really going to strain the profits of these corporations, because the corporations have to borrow. And if inflation is higher, they typically have to pay more for borrowing money. And a lot of these companies, wisely, the wise companies, use borrowing as part of their strategy of building wealth. So when you heard, then the inflation numbers came out and they were low, right? So we're not so concerned about inflation. The bond market started to drop and money started to shift back to the stock market, and prices go up. This is the funny thing. Nothing changed for these companies. Like Pip was saying about, was it Bezos, or sorry, what's the name from Tesla? Nothing really changed with the Tesla, and he could be up, $27 billion or lose, $50 billion in a single day. This is ridiculous. This is the fantasy or the idea that the money or the value in these things is actually real. It's not. And often when you talk to advisors, they'll talk about balancing it out. And as you get older, they'll want you to go to the bond market versus the stock market, because you can't afford to lose your money because you're drawing from the money. So the concerning or the crappy thing is a lot of the people that are retired have a lot of their money in the bond market, and the yields are they're horrific. I mean, lending money in the U.S. What's the 10-year at, Pip? Do you know what the 10-year is at?
I don't know, but I can look it up.
10 years at. Let me check the 10-year bond. Give me 1 second.
I got it.
1 second.
1.534.
Is it 1.534? So 1.534 means that if you lent or bought a bond for $100, they pay you back $1.54. $1.54 is what you get per year on that on that bond. It's unbelievable. But you know what? It's the largest market. It's massive. The bond market, lending market is much bigger than the stock. It's massive. It's huge. So all this money. But wait, if you go to Europe, the bond market's got negative yields. So you lend the government's money and you get less back than you gave them. So this is the idea that the value of money is going to deteriorate, or the ability to get it secured or safe is it's far better to take the loss, that small loss, than a larger loss. So your question about the effect, how that can affect the stock market, is because of the, a big driver was inflation, right? If inflation is higher, the bond market's, the concern of inflation, the bond market's, it's going to go up. The value of those bonds, or the cost of money is going to go up. So you want to pay attention to, and I don't know, are you investing in the stock market or the bond market?
No, I think they're in the stock market.
They're in the stock market. Yeah. So I mean, if you saw the market last week when they were talking about the inflation, you remember that they were talking about inflation and stuff. The market took a little bit of a hit, and you saw the yields move in the bond market. So the bond market, I've never traded bonds, but the bond market's a very interesting and lucrative place if you understand it. But you need to understand it for sure. And there's some cool funds out there that move based on inflation and bonds and the value of those bonds. So it's not a terrible place. There's a place for everything. You know, we talk about hating CDs and GICs, but I mean, if you have money and you have nowhere else to put it because you've got it spread all over the place, you're making great returns here and there. Idle capital is the worst you can have. It's not a terrible idea to put it in a CD or a GIC if you've exhausted all other opportunities. And same with your house. If your house, if you got all this money and you literally have nowhere else to put it, because, and that being said, you put it into high, medium, and low risks, if there's such a thing. Interest, right? Returns, you're making 10 here, 5 here, 7 here, 14 here. If you have money and there's nothing else to do with that money, is it a terrible idea to pay off a mortgage? Well, I mean, if you got nowhere else to put it, I mean, go ahead. The dilemma I find is that when you pay off your mortgage, to get the money out or the equity out, there's two real primary ways. I sell the house or I take a line of credit against my house. And that's me borrowing my own money. It's kind of, this just doesn't sound right to me. So, consider getting your money out there aggressively and managing risk. Really, the risk lies in the investor and where you're putting that money, and get some decent returns. There's great opportunity there. Any other questions, Ben?
I just typed it in again. Any other questions or things you want Sam to rant about?
We'll talk more. I mean, we'll go through more of the credit periods and the effect it had in the economy. But credit's a very, very cool thing. It's a very exciting thing. So it's old. It's you're talking over 5,000 years old. We're talking about ancient civilizations that Babylon, Mesopotamia. These are old. I mean, they existed and they're old, and they absolutely worked in a modern sense of banking and money lending. It existed for them. So it's not like we invented this stuff and it's all brand new. And I thought it was pretty cool studying the history of money. When companies like Equifax, and I believe they were called Equifax originally was called. Let me get that for you. Give me 1 second. There's an actual name that they used to call before Equifax. So Equifax has been around a long time. Let me see if I can find that for you.
I'll get it. You keep talking.
Okay, so Equifax and TransUnion came in after, but Equifax, they started tracking that. Oh, right here. I think I got it right here.
Experian is another one.
Yeah, Experian too. So FICO, Fair Isaac Company, know a little bit about them. They created, the FICO score, the scoring system, which one day we should talk about on the show, actually, how they score it and what you can do to work with that. But that particular system, the FICO system, which Fair Isaac Company created, that was the short form. They created that system of scoring, and it was a secret. Nobody knew. You could get denied a mortgage and not even understand why. How your score works. What's that?
You Canadians talk differently because we call it a FICO score, but you can call it a FICO score all you want.
FICO or FICO?
Yeah. So
FICO sounds more medical. I think FICO is better.
Interestingly enough, Equifax was founded in 1899 as the retail credit company.
There you go. 1900s. Like this stuff's old, man. This stuff's old. You know what I mean? This stuff's been around a long time. We just don't know. Because we're more conscious of what's right in front of us. I'm trying to look up too the exact time. Yeah, one of the first credit cards ever was the Diners Club, introduced in I believe it was 1950. 1950, the Diners Club was one of the first credit cards ever put out. It's been around a long time, and actually credit became real popular in the US. So we had the FICO score and stuff like that, and credit was around. But when Ford, the Ford and GM started producing cars, people couldn't afford. I mean, you got to save a lot of cash. That might take years and years. And you got to remember, you're paying your own bills. How long would it take you to afford a car? So car companies like GM and Ford started extending credit so you could buy their cars. And we're talking like 1920, 15. It's been around a long time. This stuff it's not new. Now the effects of it, I think we're getting more understanding and knowledge of what those effects are. But the laws of wealth, they've been around. We're talking like over 5,000 years they've been around. Those laws we talk about are real. They're real. And it doesn't matter what time period you're talking about. Those effects are real. Yeah, Pep?
Well, one of the earliest forms of credit that I've ever studied was people could buy seeds, and then the seeds would not be, you would have to pay for them on credit. And then once you harvested the crop, you owed the person who sold you the seeds, because you got what, depending on the crop, probably 5 to 8 months before it actually is harvested. And so that is one of the original things. And so, I think that is probably the one of the first forms of credit, if you will.
Yeah, that's pretty old. And you think about, that's a great example of if someone couldn't afford to buy the seeds, right, then that crop would never be produced by them. Now the individual could produce his own crop. He can only produce so much. But if he was willing to lend seeds to people to grow crops, think about that. They don't have the money to do this. He gives them the seeds, or she gives them the seeds. They grow a crop that increases the production value, that increases the GDP, that increases the growth or new wealth created because of the ability and the acceptance of, in the system of lending. Lending is extremely important. There's still this overhang or hangover that's we're talking like 600 years old, 700, or actually older, with usury being banned, being said, you can't borrow money, and the idea of credit being negative. It used to be debtor jails. You used to go to jail. You used to go to jail if you didn't pay your debts. You could go to jail. If you predate, the Middle Ages, even going back further, I mean, you could be in some countries, you could be enslaved for owing that money, and your family members could be enslaved for owing money. So you can imagine the history of owing somebody. When the consequences are so severe, people would see that it's a bad thing and a form or an opportunity of exploitation, especially if you're borrowing to survive, just to simply survive. That's horrific. I mean, there's no way out of that. But really, and a big part of that was the inability to recognize that the rich or the wealthy at the time, although they have resources, they can't continue to expand that unless they invest in other people's ability to expand that wealth. They can't just hold all the cards, because you can't, the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. The rich can't get rich if everybody else is poor. There's nowhere where are you getting this new wealth, right? So the wealthy had to recognize that there had to be an investment in the ability to create the middle class or the emerging classes, to allow the wealthy to continue to expand wealth. They couldn't do it on their own, unless you're willing to, even if you were willing to embrace the idea that some sort of human slavery was acceptable, which is ridiculous. Even that kills itself. It doesn't work. I mean, somebody has to have wealth to purchase it. So if you get into smaller groups where concentration of wealth, and there's no wealth, or the creation of wealth has been stunted for the other emerging classes, there is no emerging classes, they can't keep getting wealthy. I mean, this is why, and you've heard me say this, and I'm an extreme fan of the United States. And one of the main reasons I'm an extreme fan of the United States, is there a pursuit of capitalism. I'm a deep believer in capitalism. That being said, capitalism on its own, unbridled capitalism, like capitalism without some sort of boundaries, will cannibalize itself. It'll cannibalize itself. I believe in an open and free market. I absolutely do. You've heard me talk about, I don't like when the government gets involved in the market in certain ways. That doesn't. But the fiction that they want capitalists to have a conscience, capitalists to have some kind of moral code. And I'm not saying you should, as an individual, shouldn't have a moral code. You should. But money there's no moral code behind money. Money's not a thing that has feelings or emotions. So to place that on corporations, I think is ridiculous. The assumption that they should have some moral code, that's ridiculous. So you have to put in, certain things in place that restrict bad behavior or behavior that is debilitating to capitalism in place to stop pure capitalism from destroying itself. because it will, because pure capitalism, as an example, right? And this is not I don't want to generalize the statement that everybody that's capitalist believes this, but Pip's been in business a long time. His family's been in business a long time. I'm in business too. I mean, could I have the desire to have a zero labor cost? Would that help my bottom line if I didn't have to pay for labor? Well, it looks good on a balance sheet, right? If I'm producing products and service and I have to pay $0 to do that, it looks good. Initially, it looks good. But eventually, by depleting the ability for those people to accumulate wealth, there's going to be a time when they can't purchase my product or service. It doesn't make sense. So this idea that the owners and workers are in conflict, socialist, communist kind of philosophy, that the capitalist wants to pay nothing for labor and the employees want a larger share, the workers want a larger share of the wealth. Is there that tension or dynamic in a capitalist system? So to speak, there is, but you got to be a fool to think it's a good idea to pay your employees zero. Like, that's just stupid. It's dumb. It doesn't make any sense. It's very short-term thinking. You have to think long-term. I need, I took over a business and I told my employees when I took it over, my goal is to make you the highest paid individuals in our company. Because of competing in our class, I wanted to pay them the most. I absolutely do want that. And I think that true capitalism, my apology, my capitalism, the capitalism that I pursue, should be measured on how many new jobs you can make, not how many you can eliminate. I really believe that. If we, there should be a mandate, I think, for capitalists to say, you know what, I'm going to create 50 new jobs this year, right? And think about it. The reason that's a big deal for a capitalist, and it's totally legitimate, is a capitalist buys their employees at wholesale and sells them at retail. That's a good deal. I mean, I get to pay an employee, say, $15 an hour, and I'm making $30 an hour. Not sure I take all the risk and spend and overhead, blah, blah, blah. But hey, man, I mean, if you're an employee, you will never get paid what you're worth. The day you get paid what you're worth, they downsize you, they release you, right? Because there's no margin. There's no margin for the business owner. So I want to create jobs, and I want more people making money, because my goals and their goals are parallel. And the more money they make and the more jobs I create, the more money I make. You can't pursue this race to zero. I want to pay my employees zero. That's ridiculous. Yeah, Pep.
Well, I mean, and that's the true part of capitalism with employees, is you buy them at wholesale and sell them out at retail.
Yeah, nothing
and
wrong.
That's how you make money as a business owner. That's what it comes down to, unless you're a single person business owner. A couple of questions I want to make sure we get to. And one of the questions is getting unsecured lines of credit. My opinion, credit cards are the quickest and easiest way to get unsecured lines of credit. You can go to a bank that you have a relationship built with, and they may be able to give you a line of credit based on your history. They may want to tie it to equity in a property. They may want to tie it to inventory or things like that. If you're in business, maybe it's future contracts or receivables. But there are opportunities to get unsecured lines of credit. So if you have a relationship with a bank that you already use, I would go there and ask them first what type of lines of credit they have available to you. That would be my first thought. You can also go, and there's many sites. I don't know what site. I'm sure there's one in Canada just like this. I like the site in the US called creditcards.com.
.ca. Yeah, we got one called .ca. Yeah.
I think creditcards.ca does the exact same thing. And what you can do is you can go on there, and it's like a buffet of different credit cards. And I know people are going to freak out, go, well, is that going to affect my credit scores? Is that going to do whatever? My opinion is your credit score is a living, breathing, moving target. It goes up, it goes down, and sometimes you don't even know why it goes up and it goes down because of Equifax and TransUnion. I don't think you guys in Canada do Experian, but we do.
No, yeah.
Experian in the U.S. The
Yeah.
point I mean that I mean by that is, if I asked anybody that's on here right now, would you rather have an extra $30,000 of available capital and your credit score to go down 10 points? Or would you rather not have that extra $30,000 of capital and your credit score to stay where it is? That's really the cost. And that's the maximum cost. It's 2 to 10 points is what it's going to cost you to call and get your credit increased. And actually over time, as you increase your ability to borrow, your credit score goes up. So there's a lot of things you can do. And I'd love to talk more about credit cards. They're literally one of my favorite things to talk about. So I think there's a lot of things that we can look into. Oh, okay. So we got Charles. Great. You come in as a different name on there, Charles. Charles has a good question. I'm sure Sam will have a great opinion on this. It says, and this could definitely last till the end of the hour, I'm sure. The question, Sam, is, now I got to find the question. It's here somewhere. It says, so will the middle class actually go away, or is there just an expansion and contraction of the classes? What say you?
What say me? Let me, just before I get into that, I want to make a comment about what Pip was talking about with unsecured credit. So this is credit with no security, no land, no property, no your car, whatever, no actual thing that's backing, recourse basically for the lender. The lender can't, there's no place for them to get it, repo your car, your house, like certain secured types of lending. One of the things Pip's taught me and talked about for years is considering the worst case scenario. So unsecured credit is absolutely, when you're looking at worst case scenario, the best kind of credit you could get, because in a worst case scenario system, all they can do is your credit can go bad. You can claim bankruptcy, which, by the way, for us is not a bad word, bankruptcy. I mean, if it happens, it's a business decision more than anything. It's not a personal judgment. It's just a business decision that a corporation has to go bankrupt. Doesn't mean it's the end of the world. In our current system and times, if your corporation goes bankrupt, or even you, an individual, goes bankrupt, you don't go to jail. There's no debtor jail. You're allowed to reset and restart. And thank God it's like that, because if it wasn't like that, people like Henry Ford wouldn't have been able to build the Ford company, right? Because if he went bankrupt, which he did more than once, he would have been able to start that company. So there has to be the ability to reset. So in the worst case scenario, if things go bad, unsecured credit is the best kind of credit, because the loss really is the least amount of loss you could possibly take, because it's your credit and you're bankrupt for a period of 5 to 7 years when you can start participating in the lending system. So I think that unsecured credit is absolutely the best type of credit, because you're all things being equal and considering things, it's 100% the easiest and best type of credit to get when you're talking about zero assets. Now, if you have assets, will you pay less on interest? Absolutely. Will you be able to access a lot of different lenders, more lenders than stay in unsecured? Sure you will. But I mean, let's be honest, how many letters are you getting in a day of people offering you credit cards? That's all unsecured credit. It's based on your financial reputation and your credit score. Me and Pip are big proponents. We believe deeply that your credit score should be something you should pay attention to and manage. Like Pip says, it moves around, it goes up, it goes down. You need to understand it so you can maximize. We look at it like an ATM machine. It can maximize your accessibility of money. You work on your credit score, it goes up. You take money out, it goes down. You work on your credit score for another 6 months, it goes up. You manage your money properly, right? Your credit properly. You pull out some more money. It's like an ATM for credit. We love it. So you definitely want to pay attention and be on top of that. The other thing is, the other thing is talking about. My apologies. The question specifically again was about the middle class, the classes themselves, right? Can you repeat that just so I make sure I address it?
Do you think the middle class will go away, or are classes are the three classes just contracting and expanding at different?
Yeah, I don't think. Well, I hope they never go away. That would be, and I don't think it's just three. But if we generalize, right, upper middle and lower class. But there's stratas in between there, right? I don't think you would ever want that to happen, because that would be, the end of a healthy, growing economy. You want an expanding middle class. You want a middle class that's growing, but not just the middle class. This is what's killed This is what's funny to me. So they say we want an expanding middle class. Well, you can't expand the middle class by reducing the ability for the wealthy to expand their own wealth. It just doesn't work, right? It does. You have to have all the classes expand. Nobody says, that nobody gets upset because they say the disparity between the middle class and the wealthy is expanding. Well, guess what? The middle class and the poor are expanding too. That's going to continue to happen too. That should happen, right? I mean, the middle class should be able to expand. Somebody says, oh, this is terrible. The middle class needs to stop, making money and pay more in taxes because they're expanding from the lower classes, right? This kind of talk is silly and ridiculous. It's just a mishmash of words trying to attract a certain sort of support from a large group of people, which is the middle class, the largest, you believe, or you'd want to be your largest group of people. So, you'd want your middle class to expand. I don't think it's going away. I think the creation of wealth and the governments, as long as governments focus on giving me the ability to go from lower to middle to upper class, if they create an environment that allows me to pursue that, I think that will continue to expand. As the middle class expands, though, you should expect the wealthy to get wealthier, like the wealthier and wealthier and wealthier. I mean, it's inevitable. This relationship, they all move up. They all move up. People all move up. And the other thing that we want is the ability that if we go backwards, that we can step 2 steps backwards, things go wrong. So I'm in the middle class, things go wrong, and I'm in the lower class, that I have ability to accelerate and come back to the middle and expand beyond that. That's a great example of a point being of being bankrupt. But when you're in middle class and you go bankrupt because you started a business, you went bankrupt, you might go, down to working or lower class. And, in this modern economy, you're allowed to come back. They don't say, oh, well, you had your shot. I know you're only 25, but it's game over for you. You're going to have to be poor for the rest of your life. That's not the way it is. So I do believe that will continue to expand the middle class, and the wealthiest 1% will become even, huge amounts of wealth. They'll have more relative to the rest of the population. That's not a bad thing. The expanding gaps just denotes the expansion of wealth. And as long as there's there's a flow of distribution between them, the rich can't get rich if everybody's poor. There's just it. So you need the middle classes. You need the working class. You need those different classes all producing wealth for the wealthy to continue to be wealthy. And I think that we should not feel guilty about wanting to be wealthy or having money or having wealth. I don't think that doesn't make any sense to me. If you're a middle class and you think it's unfair that there's billionaires, you're basically saying it's not good to have money or be wealthy. How are you going to get out of the middle class? Like, how much do you deserve? How much is enough? These questions are kind of ridiculous to me. You should, and if we were adding morality to this conversation when it comes to wealth, Pip and I believe that you should create as much wealth as humanly possible in your lifetime as a responsibility, and redistribute it as you see fit, to people that need it, and the way you want to do it, and the quality of your life and your family. I think we believe deeply in that. You should create wealth. That's a responsibility, and to share that wealth. Pep, you want to share something?
Well, and there's some comments on communism and socialism, and I have opinions on those. And if you're trying to make everybody equal, then nobody's going to be equal. That's you're going to have a real high upper class and a lot of lower income people. I mean, one of the biggest and I think the best things, I think and Sam just briefly talked about it, is bankruptcy. And because I think for the average person, probably even for most anybody, the term bankruptcy is the biggest fear financially that they can even wrap their head around. What's the worst case scenario? And so for those of you guys that might be worried about the middle class going away, those of you guys might be worried about, we hear it on the news all the time, middle class is shrinking, yada, yada, yada. I think the working class is shrinking a little bit, and the working poor, meaning some of those jobs aren't as good as they once were compared to cost of living. I think that's a concern. A lot of those better paying jobs went overseas to people that are being paid less. But if you ever get bummed out about your situation, read some stuff on Walt Disney, literally one of my favorite people to read on. think he was born in either 1900 or 1901. I'm going to say 1901 if memory serves me correctly. And in the early 20s, so I know that he was in World War I, and he was too young to be there because he volunteered, whatever you call it, enlisted, and he was driving a medical truck. That's what he did because he was too young to do anything else. He was 16 years old. So literally did everything he could to go fight for his country. So good for him. And there's a lot of people that knock Disney. I love reading about Disney because you go talk about rags to riches. He comes back from there and he wants to get into animation, and he starts his first company, and I'm probably going to get this wrong, Laugh-O-Gram or something like that. And what's interesting about that is he used OPM. Think about that. He wanted to create animation. That was his big thing. He loved to draw cartoons. And so he gets some firm in New York to be the financial backer. So he's got other people's money, not even a bank, another company. Well, unfortunately, he started hiring animators and doing all the stuff that he needed to do. And the company that was financially backing him went bankrupt. And so now they didn't have any money. So he didn't have any money to pay his animators, his employees. So he's got nothing. And so he loses everything. And I believe it was 1922 or 1923, he went bankrupt. Well, 5 years later, and this is where I remember the history more than that history, was when he created, in 1928, he created Mickey Mouse. And they formed that company with, at that time, it would later become the Disney company. And think about going from bankrupt to what he did in his lifetime is literally almost hard to fathom. It's real easy to look at somebody, and say, oh, they got lucky, or they did this or they did that. I don't know the stories of Henry Ford. I've heard that he's gone bankrupt. I've not read enough about him, but I have read a lot about Disney and some of the best reading I've ever done. So anything you can pick up on Disney, read it. It's great stuff. So I think, just the fact that we have a reset button. If you truly make a mistake and you're not trying to harm people, you are taking a risk, don't get me wrong. But if you truly make a mistake, there's a way to reset. Does it take a little time? Yeah. Does it take a lot of, we'll go with guts, I could use other words. Yeah, it does. But if you're not willing to even risk, then you shouldn't get rewarded at the end of the day. It's kind of like Sam says this all the time. Why are there minimum wage jobs? Because anybody can do them. There's no skill required, or the skill to do them is so minimal.
Low skill, yeah.
That anybody can be taught them for the most part. And the reason we have a minimum wage is really for apprentice type work for first time people. It's, the average 30, 40, 50-year-old adult shouldn't be doing minimum wage work. That means they haven't kept their skill set up, or whatever situation happened in their life that they're getting higher pay. So I always believe, we could talk about minimum wage. It's kind of fun to do the impossible. That's Walt Disney. It's a great quote from him too. Somebody just put that in there. But I think the whole minimum wage argument is definitely there. But I truly believe people will pay what you're worth. I mean, they'll pay you if you're worth something to them. And we operated grocery stores. At one point, we had 250 employees. So we had a lot of employees at one time. And when they would talk about minimum wage going up, I would say 60, if not 70% of our employees were on minimum wage. Why? Because 60% of these people, this was their first job. They don't have a lot of skills. And it's kind of an apprentice type situation. But I can guarantee the people that had been there years and years and years, and we had some employees, I could give you a list of probably 15 employees that worked for us for 30 years or more. I could give you a list of one that worked for us for more than 50. That's an insane amount of time to work in a job like that. And so Leonard was, and he's still around, he's 90 years old, but he's an amazing man. The point being is if you take care of people and you pay them what they're, to a certain extent what they're worth, you're still, as the employer, getting them at wholesale and selling them out at retail. Don't be mad about that if you're the employee. Don't feel bad about it if you're the employer, because you're creating value for them. And without you, they don't have that job. or they've got to go get another job. And everybody's free to choose their own job. If you don't like your job, I don't think anywhere in Canada or anywhere in the US, if you don't like your job, you can't say, you know what, I'm not going to work here anymore. I'm going to go work somewhere else. I don't think there is any situation where they're holding a gun to your head that you have to work there. Now, there may be some countries, we won't get into it, that's the case, but definitely not in Canada or the US. So, you know, that's my 2 cents on all of it. But read stuff on Walt Disney. Some of the best, and it's motivational, it's entrepreneurial, it's overcoming obstacles and creating a work environment that, even though a lot of people think, you know, there's whatever going on in the Disney company, they did a great job, and they do it with a lot of lower paid people at the end of the day.
I think that some great points, and I think that we want to understand. And when we say low skill, that's all relative, right? I mean, the skill level of people, the general population, you know, an educated population can go up. It's maybe low skill is the wrong phrasing. We should say common skill. So it's common amongst people. It's a skill that many people have. We don't want to say it doesn't have value or it's low. It's just a lot of people have it. And in a market, that could be considered lower value just because everybody has it. We can get it anywhere. Supply and demand, right? The one point I want to say, you know, that I want you to consider, maybe we can talk about this, and we'll continue to talk about different parts of the history of credit and money throughout. But I want you to consider the idea that you'd be hard pressed to give me a situation where it wasn't better to go into debt than pay cash. Like that's how powerful and backwards our understanding of money and debt is. There's pretty much nothing that it's better, you know, that it's not better to go into debt for than it is to pay cash for. There's almost zero. There is zero situation. Now you might, you know what, I'm not even going to talk about it. You come up with situations, but I want you to be reasonable and think, this is what you say: if I paid money or if I paid debt, you know, would debt improve my situation instead of me using money to use debt in this particular situation, all right? In this particular, and let's keep it so we don't get crazy and ridiculous. Let's keep it with investments, okay? Because it's easy to say if I pay cash for something that's losing money, I'll lose more money if I'm using debt. Well, you're absolutely right. But you asked a question. Why are you putting up the cash? Why would you buy something and call it an asset if it was a liability? Obviously, debt's not going to improve that. We're talking about, you know, situations where if we're looking out into the world, and I don't want to get into it because we will at one point when we're ready for it, but I can't think of a time or a situation, really, even non-investment, you'd be hard pressed to find, you know, why you wouldn't use debt over cash in just about every purchase. You know, you can create. Pep used to talk about this, the what ifs. Well, what if interest is 60%? Well, let's take it easy. You know, interest is 60%. That would mean a whole lot of other things in the economy. Okay, so it's not like you'd be in this economy and be charged 60% for borrowing money. That's just not real. So, you know, let's keep it within reason. Well, let's explore that. Ask yourself, is it better to go into debt for this investment versus cash? And start really pressing yourself to look at that. Go ahead, Pip.
I was just say, let's make sure we talk about that next time, because we're already an hour, an hour and 15 into this. I went a little later tonight just because we didn't get started till 10 after the hour. Sure. So anything else you want to add real quickly on part? I hope
you guys continue to press us for questions and things that you want to understand. I think it's so important that you participate in this conversation. So please, Pip, do we have an email that they could send questions to and ideas to?
Well, of course, they can just send me anything on just per private message on Facebook. You're all friends with me on there. Send me a private message and we can obviously go from there. That's never an issue whatsoever. I am going to ask you, share this with other people. Let other people know if you like the wealth debate, even though it's not much of a debate, but that's okay. Let's see if you like it. Let them people share the video. The other thing is, please, if nothing else, watch it on Facebook. Subscribe to my on YouTube. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, and all the recordings are on there as well. So if you want to watch something old on there, you can. If you didn't catch this one, in the next couple of days, my wife will have it on the YouTube channel. So I'd love to have you guys do that. Appreciate it.
And hey Pep, we're gonna do a section on crazy news about money. All right, we're gonna do a segment. It's gonna be at the end of our show. We'd love you to send us news clippings or articles or things that you read that you think are just ridiculous, like somebody paying for the first ever tweet. I don't even understand exactly what it is, but somebody bought the very first tweet. That's, to me, is a funny story about wealth or money. If you do come across those, please send it to our Facebook, like Pip said, and we'll definitely do 3 or 4 of those, hopefully at the end of the show. If you have something that you want to talk about and it's through the news, we love that stuff. Send it to us, and we'll definitely bring it up on the call when possible on the show, and we'll definitely expand on it. All right, that's it, Pip. Just wanted to add that.
We've been doing every Wednesday night. We're 13 sessions in, so we've done 1/4 of a year right now. So 1/4 of this is in the books. We're going to keep doing them every Wednesday night, 8 o'clock Eastern time. You'll always see it on my Facebook feed. There'll be promotions every Tuesday, Wednesday for the wealth debate. If you have friends and you want to send them here, please do so. And keep track of what we're doing here. We got lots of stuff going on. So if you ever see anything with Pip's Path, that's Sam and I, and it's also Steve Hipple and Bradley Strack. So you can see us doing stuff that's kind of funny. Wendy made a comment, everywhere I go, I see Steve. And that's a good thing. Yeah, the more you see Steve, the better. The less you see Pip, the better. That's what it's all about. So with that being said, turn to somebody you know, somebody you don't know, and tell them you're going to be all right. And we'll see you guys next week.
See you next week.